What happens when America's favorite country star walks into the lion's den of daytime television and refuses to back down from one of the most outspoken hosts on television? You're about to witness a clash that nobody saw coming, a confrontation so intense it left producers scrambling and viewers at home picking their jaws up off the floor. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because this story will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about live television. The studio lights were blazing hot as Blake Shelton settled into his chair on the view set. His signature cowboy boots crossed casually as he adjusted his microphone. The audience was buzzing with excitement, expecting the usual lighthearted banter that comes with a country music star promoting his latest album. Joy Behar sat across from him, her notes spread out on the table, that familiar mischievous glint in her eye that regular viewers know all too well. "So Blake," Joy began, leaning forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your new album talks a lot about small-town values and traditional America. Some critics are saying it's really just coded language for exclusion and intolerance. What's your response to that?" Blake's easy smile faltered for just a moment, his blue eyes narrowing slightly as he processed the question. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah N., Alyssa Farah Griffin, and Sunny Hostin, exchanged glances, sensing the shift in atmosphere immediately. "Well, Joy," Blake replied, his Oklahoma drawl becoming more pronounced, "I think that's a pretty unfair characterization of what I'm trying to say in my music. When I sing about small towns and the people who live there, I'm celebrating communities where neighbors help neighbors, where people work hard and take care of their families. I'm not sure how that translates to exclusion." Joy wasn't backing down. She shuffled through her papers dramatically, clearly prepared for this moment. "But Blake, when you sing about keeping things the way they've always been, when you romanticize a past that wasn't exactly welcoming to everyone, don't you think you're sending a message that change isn't welcome, that certain people aren't welcome?" The tension in the studio was palpable now. Camera operators adjusted their positions, sensing this wasn't going to be the typical celebrity fluff piece. Blake uncrossed his legs and leaned forward, his hands clasped together, his voice remaining steady but with an edge creeping in. "Joy, I think you're reading something into my music that just isn't there. I've never said anything about not welcoming people. What I'm talking about is the importance of community, of knowing your neighbors, of having values that have stood the test of time. Hard work, honesty, taking care of your family. Those aren't political statements, they're human values." "Oh, come on, Blake," Joy shot back, her voice rising slightly. "You can't be that naive. When you're on stage, waving flags and talking about the good old days, your audience knows exactly what you mean. You're dog whistling to people who want to turn back the clock on progress." Whoopi tried to interject, sensing the conversation was heading into dangerous territory. "Maybe we should." "No, Whoopi, let him answer." Joy interrupted, her focus laser-sharp on Blake. "I want to hear him defend this." Blake's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled, though anyone watching could see the storm brewing. Behind his eyes, "Joy, I've spent my entire career bringing people together through music. I've worked with artists from every background you can imagine. When I'm on that stage, I see faces of all colors, all ages, all walks of life, singing along to the same songs. That's what America looks like to me." "That's a nice sentiment, Blake, but let's talk reality." Joy pressed on, clearly not satisfied with his response. "Your fan base is predominantly white, predominantly rural, and let's be honest, predominantly conservative. When you sing about traditional values, they hear traditional hierarchies. When you sing about the way things used to be, they're thinking about when women knew their place and minorities knew theirs." The studio fell silent. Even the production crew seemed to hold their breath. Sarah N. shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Sunny Hostin watched the exchange with obvious concern. Blake's face had gone from friendly country star to something much harder, much less accommodating. "That is completely out of line, Joy," Blake said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're putting words in my mouth and thoughts in my fans' heads that have nothing to do with who I am or what I stand for. You don't know me, and you clearly don't know my fans." Joy leaned back in her chair, but her expression remained defiant. "I know what I see, Blake. I know what your industry represents, and I know what your audience responds to. You can dress it up in pretty words about community and values, but at the end of the day, you're profiting off nostalgia for a time when America was less equal, less fair, less free for millions of people." Blake stood up abruptly, his microphone still attached, causing a sharp feedback screech through the studio speakers. The audience gasped collectively, and several producers could be seen frantically gesturing from the sidelines. This was live television, and things were spiraling out of control fast. "You know what, Joy? I came here to talk about my music, to connect with fans, to have a good time. But you've decided to turn this into some kind of political ambush where you get to lecture me about things you clearly don't understand. I won't sit here and be accused of promoting hatred when everything I do is about bringing people together." Joy remained seated, but her voice rose to match his intensity. "Oh, so now I'm the problem. I'm asking legitimate questions about the message in your music, and suddenly I'm ambushing you. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Blake, the minute someone challenges the narrative, the minute someone asks the hard questions, you get defensive and angry. I'm not angry because you're asking questions, Blake shot back, his hands gesturing emphatically. I'm angry because you're twisting my words and making assumptions about millions of good people based on your own prejudices. You sit here in your New York bubble and pass judgment on people you've never met, communities you've never been part of. The other hosts were now openly trying to regain control of the situation. Whoopi was speaking firmly into her microphone. We need to take this down a notch, people. But Joy wasn't finished. My prejudices? Blake, I'm calling out what I see. I'm calling out an industry and a culture that has historically excluded and marginalized people. And when I do, you get upset. That tells me everything I need to know. What it should tell you, Blake said, his voice cutting through the chaos, is that you're wrong, dead wrong, and the fact that you can't even consider that possibility. The fact that you're so convinced of your own righteousness that you can't hear what I'm actually saying. That's the real problem here. Chat controls sonnet for. The studio audience was now murmuring audibly, some people standing to get a better view of the unfolding drama. Security personnel had moved closer to the set, though they remained just out of camera range, unsure whether to intervene in what was still technically an interview. Joy finally stood up to meet Blake's energy, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You want to talk about bubbles, Blake? Let's talk about the bubble you live in, where you can sing about the good old days without acknowledging that those days were only good for people who looked like you. Where you can profit off nostalgia without taking responsibility for what that nostalgia represents. Blake's face was flushed now, his famous charm completely abandoned. You're unbelievable, Joy. You're so determined to make this about race, about politics, about everything except what it actually is. It's about music. It's about celebrating the places and people that raised me. But you can't see past your own agenda long enough to understand that. My agenda. Joy laughed bitterly, shaking her head. My agenda is equality. Blake, my agenda is making sure that when we celebrate America, we're celebrating all of America, not just the parts that make some people comfortable. Sunny Hostin finally managed to break in, her voice professional but strained. I think what Joy is trying to say is that music has power, and with that power comes responsibility to consider how your message might be interpreted. Blake whirled around to face Sunny, his frustration now directed at multiple targets. Sunny, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't need anyone explaining to me what my own songs mean. I wrote them. I lived the experiences that inspired them, and I'm not going to apologize for celebrating the community that made me who I am just because it makes some people uncomfortable. Joy stepped closer, her voice dropping to a more intense register. Nobody's asking you to apologize for your community, Blake. We're asking you to acknowledge that your platform reaches beyond your community, that when you romanticize a certain version of America, you're sending a message to people who might not have been welcome in that America. And what message is that exactly? Joy, Blake challenged, his arms crossed defensively. That hard work matters. That family matters. That taking care of your neighbors matters. Because those are the messages in my songs. And if that threatens you, maybe the problem isn't with my music. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to find middle ground, her voice careful and measured. Blake, I don't think anyone is threatened by those values. I think the concern is more about context, about making sure that when we celebrate traditional values, we're not excluding people who also hold those values but might not fit the traditional image. Blake turned to Alyssa, his expression softening slightly at her more diplomatic approach. Alyssa, I hear what you're saying, and I respect it. But I shouldn't have to disclaim every song I write with a political statement. When I sing about my hometown, when I sing about the people who raised me, I'm not making a statement about who belongs and who doesn't. I'm just telling my story. Joy wasn't willing to let the moment pass. But Blake, your story doesn't exist in a vacuum. When you tell your story on national television, when you sell millions of records, when you influence how people think about America, you have a responsibility to consider the impact. The impact. Blake's voice rose again, his composure slipping further. The impact is that people feel less alone. The impact is that someone working 2 jobs to support their family hears a song that says their life has value. The impact is that communities that get looked down on by people like you feel seen and heard. People like me. Joy's eyebrows shot up, her voice sharpening dangerously. What exactly do you mean by people like me, Blake? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in the studio seemed to realize that Blake was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. The cameras stayed rolling, capturing every nuance of the exchange that was rapidly becoming television history. Blake paused, seeming to recognize the trap, but his anger overrode his caution. I mean people who think they're better than everyone else. People who sit in judgment of entire communities without ever trying to understand them. People who think their college degrees and their coastal addresses make them morally superior to the rest of us. Joy's laugh was sharp and humorless. There it is, there's the real Blake Shelton. Not the aw shucks country boy, but the resentful populist who thinks education and urban living are character flaws. Thank you for finally being honest. Honest, Blake shot back, his voice now loud enough that the microphones were picking up distortion. You want honesty, Joy? Here's some honesty for you. You've spent the last 15 minutes trying to twist everything I've said into something ugly, trying to make me into some kind of villain because I won't condemn the people and places that made me. That's not journalism, that's character assassination. Whoopi was now standing as well, her voice commanding. Okay, everybody needs to take a step back here. We're on live television, and this has gone way beyond what anyone signed up for. But Joy wasn't backing down. No, Whoopi, this is exactly what we signed up for. This is what happens when we actually ask the hard questions instead of just lobbing softballs at celebrities. Blake can't handle being challenged, and that reaction tells us everything we need to know. Blake pointed directly at Joy, his finger shaking with anger. You didn't challenge me, Joy, you ambushed me. You came in with your mind already made up, with your little script about what I represent and what my fans think. And when I tried to give you actual answers, you ignored them and kept pushing your narrative. My narrative is that public figures have responsibility for their messaging, Joy fired back. Your narrative is that you should be able to say whatever you want without consequences or criticism. Well, welcome to the real world, Blake. Sarah N. finally found her voice, trying desperately to salvage something from the wreckage. Maybe we could talk about the music itself, about the songwriting process, about. No, Blake interrupted, his eyes never leaving Joy's face. We're way past talking about music, Sarah. Joy has made it clear that she doesn't care about my music. She cares about making a political point, about scoring points with her audience by tearing down someone she disagrees with. Joy stepped even closer, her voice dropping to an almost whisper that somehow carried more menace than her shouting. I care about the truth, Blake. I care about calling out coded language and dog whistles when I hear them. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if that makes you angry, then maybe you should ask yourself why. Blake's hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his whole body radiating tension. The only thing that makes me uncomfortable, Joy, is sitting here listening to you lecture me about my own life, my own music, my own heart. You don't know me. You don't know what I stand for, and you clearly don't want to know. I know what you just showed me, Joy replied coldly. I know that the minute I asked you to think beyond your own experience, you got defensive and angry. I know that when challenged to consider other perspectives, you retreated into victimhood and resentment. Chat, Control's sonnet for. Blake's face went white, then red, his jaw working as he processed Joy's words. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before he spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. Victimhood, resentment. Blake's voice was barely controlled now. Joy, you've spent the last 20 minutes attacking everything I stand for, everything I believe in, everyone I care about, and when I defend myself, you call it victimhood. When I refuse to let you tear down good people, you call it resentment. Joy crossed her arms, her stance defiant. I call it what it is, Blake. You came on this show expecting us to just nod along while you promoted your album. But the minute we asked substantive questions about your message, you fell apart. That's not the behavior of someone confident in their convictions. The other hosts were now openly looking toward the production team, clearly hoping for some kind of intervention. The audience was completely silent, watching this train wreck unfold with the horrified fascination of people witnessing something they knew they'd be talking about for years. Blake took a step toward Joy, his movement causing several security personnel to tense visibly. You want to know what I'm confident about, Joy? I'm confident that you're everything that's wrong with media today. You don't ask questions to get answers, you ask questions to trap people. You don't want dialogue, you want gotcha moments. And you're everything that's wrong with celebrity culture. Joy shot back without hesitation. You think your fame gives you the right to spread whatever message you want without scrutiny. You think your success means you're above criticism. Blake laughed bitterly, shaking his head. Above criticism. Joy, I've been in this business for 20 years. I've been criticized by better people than you on my worst day. But what you're doing isn't criticism, it's a hit job. And the fact that you can't tell the difference is exactly why nobody trusts the media anymore. Joy's eyes flashed dangerously. Nobody trusts the media because people like you have spent years undermining it. Whenever it asks inconvenient questions, you'd rather have everyone just accept your carefully crafted image than deal with any real scrutiny. Real scrutiny. Blake's voice cracked with incredulous anger. Joy, you came at me with a predetermined conclusion and then twisted everything I said to fit your narrative. That's not scrutiny, that's propaganda. Whoopi made one final attempt to restore order, her voice cutting through the hostility. Both of you need to step back right now. This has gone way too far. But Joy was beyond stopping, her professional facade completely abandoned. The only thing that's gone too far is Blake's reaction to legitimate questions about his public messaging. His meltdown here today proves exactly what I was saying about the defensiveness and anger underlying his whole persona. Blake's composure finally shattered completely. Meltdown, meltdown. Joy, you've been attacking me personally for the better part of half an hour, questioning my character, my integrity, everything I stand for, and you call my response a meltdown. What did you expect me to do? Just sit here and smile while you destroyed me? I expected you to have an adult conversation about the responsibility that comes with your platform. Joy fired back, her voice rising to match his. Instead, you've proven that underneath that country boy charm is someone who can't handle being challenged by a woman who won't back down. The comment about being challenged by a woman was the final straw. Blake's face went completely red, and he ripped off his microphone, throwing it onto the table with such force that it bounced and clattered to the floor. That's it, I'm done, Blake declared, his voice carrying clearly across the silent studio even without amplification. Joy, you're a bitter, miserable person who gets her kicks from tearing other people down, and I won't be part of your show anymore. Joy remained seated, but her voice followed him as he turned to leave. And you're a privileged celebrity who can't handle the truth about his own message. Walking away when the conversation gets difficult, that's very telling. Blake whirled around one final time, pointing directly at Joy. The only thing that's telling here, Joy, is that you think this was a conversation. This was an ambush, plain and simple, and everyone watching knows it. Several producers were now on set, trying to manage the chaos. One approached Blake with his hands raised in a calming gesture. Blake, let's just take a breath here. Maybe we can work this out. Blake shook his head firmly. No, we can't work this out. I came here in good faith, and I got attacked. There's nothing to work out. Joy couldn't resist one final shot. Good faith. Blake, good faith would have been acknowledging that your music might send mixed messages to some people. Good faith would have been engaging with the criticism instead of getting defensive. Blake stopped walking toward the exit and turned back one last time, his voice now deadly calm. Joy, good faith would have been asking me real questions instead of setting traps. Good faith would have been listening to my answers instead of just waiting for your next attack. But you don't know anything about good faith, do you? The silence that followed was deafening. Even Joy seemed momentarily at a loss for words, perhaps realizing that she had pushed too far. That this had become something far beyond a normal television interview. Whoopi tried desperately to salvage something from the wreckage. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with more of The View. But Blake wasn't waiting for commercial breaks. He was already walking off the set, his security team flanking him as producers scrambled to figure out what to do next. As he reached the edge of the stage area, he turned back one final time, his voice carrying across the stunned studio. To anyone watching who feels like Joy just spoke for them, you might want to ask yourself if this is really the kind of person you want representing your views. Because what I just experienced wasn't journalism. It wasn't even debate. It was just cruelty disguised as righteousness. And with that, Blake Shelton walked off the View set, leaving behind a studio full of shocked faces, rolling cameras, and the kind of television moment that would be replayed and analyzed for months to come. Joy sat in her chair, her face a mixture of defiance and something that might have been regret, as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The cameras kept rolling as producers frantically tried to figure out how to transition to commercial, capturing every moment of the aftermath of one of the most explosive celebrity interviews in daytime television history. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Was Joy right to press Blake on his messaging, or did she cross the line into personal attack? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. Because, when celebrities and controversial topics collide, you never know what might happen next. Jack controls